If you ask anyone, they'll tell you that rushing is a bad idea. But in reality, rushing is an actual tactic that highladder and esports players always use. But there's an art to properly using it. And in this video, we're gonna take a look at when you should be rushing and when you shouldn't be rushing in the 6 main game modes. So let's start with gem grab. In gem grab, you should be rushing mainly in 3 scenarios. One is when the enemy countdown has begun and they've started retreating. In these situations, you should be aggressively pushing up and trying to trap them in a corner. It's the worst possible time to play passive. The second is if you see an opening to do some damage. The goal is not to get a kill, but rather to do damage, because that'll force the enemy onto their back foot, allowing you to take control much more easily. The third scenario is if you manage to get a team wipe. In the case that you eliminate the entire enemy team, use that opportunity to find a spot from which you can both control the map and not take damage. The gem carrier shouldn't be as aggressive, remember. You shouldn't be rushing if one of your team members is dead. Unless the enemy has been team wiped, if you only have 2 people alive, then wait until the third respawns before rushing. Never ever rush as a 2-person team. If you have a brawler who has a mechanic that can easily steal the gems like Jin's super or Tara's super, do not rush at any point. Instead, use it as a trap for the enemy gem carrier when they get too close. Don't rush when you're low, you lose control if you die. Don't rush when the countdown begins. Your objective has to be about falling back and defending your gem carrier. In Brawl Ball, let's go over several possible scenarios and how to deal with them. When your whole team is alive, you should play aggressive and try to gain more control of the map. Don't rush just yet and don't go too far ahead of your own team. When only 2 of your team are alive, play passive and just defend your ground until your third returns. Retreat if you're forced to, but staying alive is what matters the most. If both of your teammates die, unless it's a 1v1, retreat while defending until your teammates respawn. Don't try to take more than 1 enemy at once. If you're spawn trapped, play aggressive and try to escape, but don't get so clumsy that you get killed. The brawlers that can bypass walls like throwers or Rico are very helpful in these scenarios. When you spawn trap them, play passive and cautious and chip your enemies down gradually. All 3 team members of your team must stay alive to maintain the trap. When the enemy falls to 2 players, push up the empty lane and pinch them. This is an ideal time to play aggro. Don't hang on to the ball when you're going aggro or trying to win a lane. Secure your own safety before going for the ball. And finally, go for the ball only after you've killed at least 1 enemy. Brawl Ball is quite the straightforward mode, but knockout is much more complex. If it's a 3v3 situation, play passive and wait for the gas to close in. Aggro brawlers like Leon and Fang are best saved for these tight spots when the enemy is stuck between you and the gas. If you're 3v2 or 3v1 against the enemy, don't rush. Remain passive and save your gadgets, etc. Get the kills slowly. If it's a 2v3, be even more careful. Don't go aggro in an attempt to get kills. You might just end up charging their supers or worse, killing yourself. In a 1v2, unless you hard counter the enemies, simply rush into the gas. This is to prevent the enemy from charging their supers off you. It's the same in a 1v3. If it's a 3v3 where your team is low, retreat so you don't die, but also don't fall so far back that you lose too much ground. If it's the other way around and the enemy team is low, you can go aggro, but avoid kill trading in these scenarios. In a 2v1, play it slow. Use gadgets or supers if you have to in order to win the round. Generally, you want to remain passive since survival is the priority here. While knockout is quite simple in its structure, the art of rushing in bounty is much more different. Rushing in bounty should be done very carefully. It usually comes down to if you're losing and there isn't a lot of time left, or if you manage to kill an enemy or 2 and break their control. Spawn trapping an enemy in bounty always makes things much easier, but avoid rushing if you have the lead, you are low on health, or one of your teammates is dead. Don't chase after enemies who have less stars than you just because they're low. You could get yourself killed. Much like knockout, the name of the game is survival, and if you fall low, retreat, heal up, and return. But perhaps the most confusing game modes in terms of rushing are Heist and Hot Zone. Let's take a look at Heist first. In Heist, you should be rushing if you're losing the match or it's really close to losing. If you're confident that you can out DPS the enemy, or even if you're not, a base race is inevitable at this point if you intend to win. If you have overwhelming control of the map, rushing the enemy safe to finish the match early is always a good way to try and secure the win. If you can make short in and out rushes to deal a little bit of damage, but make sure that no one can kill you in the process. If someone can kill you, then don't do the rush. But generally in Heist, if you're in a position where you have to rush, that will mean either you or the enemy has already won. You shouldn't be rushing when you're winning but you don't have a lot of map control, especially against high DPS, because if you get team wiped here, that's a guaranteed loss. If you're playing a bushy map, especially against tanks, until you've located every enemy, do not attempt to rush there safe. If you're low, surviving and maintaining a little pressure is better than dying, because if you die, you lose the pressure completely in that lane. If you're losing control, don't attempt to rush there safe. Since they have more control, you could kill yourself in the process and make life easier for them. Hot zone is perhaps the trickiest of them all. Just like in heist, if the enemy is taking the lead, you should be playing aggressively and trying to take control. If you're confident that you can team wipe the enemy at the beginning, then definitely rush them and take control of the zone. Afterwards, maintain a spawn trap like we discussed in the Brawl Ball section. Do not rush when you have control of the zones. Even if you have captured one zone, defending it from the enemy is always a good way to maintain pressure, and if there is only one zone, that makes it even more effective. When you're low, especially in spawn trapping maps where you could get team wiped, do not rush the enemy. Make a very careful push upwards, starting from their most annoying player. If it's a 2 or 3 zone map, ignore zones that you have already captured. Just like in heist, your main focus should lie in trying to keep your lead. But obviously having the right brawlers is always important in every single game mode, which is why you should watch this video where I explain each brawler's individual values in the game.